Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Majo, and in today's video I decided to talk about the pathways after graduation as an international student. I am not an immigration advisor or anything, so this video is just gonna be based on what I'm living right now, my own experience with the student visa, the postgrad visa, what happens after, etc. as an international student in London. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I thought of dividing this video into three parts, which is first, what happens when you're with your student visa, what can you do, what can you not do. Second, what happens when your student visa has expired. And third, what happens when your postgrad visa has expired. So when you are with the student visa, you can work, yes, but only up to 20 hours per week. That is, you can get a part-time job. So in my own experience, I decided to use it, and I worked during my studies part-time as a teaching assistant at a nursery school. So this means that the employer that hires you, of course, doesn't need to sponsor you or anything because you're using your student visa to work. So 20 hours per week is the total amount of hours that you can work during term time. This means that outside of term time, for example, when you're on holidays or when you finish studying and you have several months still with your student visa, you can work actually full-time. So this means, for example, if you're studying a 1-year full-time master's like I am or like I did, you can work part-time, in my case, until my master's was finished, which was around October, official end date. That means that I was able to work full-time between October and the expire date of my student visa, which is actually where I am right now. So right now, I will talk about that later, but I am still on a student visa and I am transitioning to a new type of visa, which is actually part 2. So what happens when your student visa has expired? Your student visa usually allows you to stay 4 or 5 months after you finish your master's or your degree in the UK. So in my case, my degree, my master's ended last year around October, like I said, and my student visa is allowing me to stay in the UK under this visa until February 2024. Which is next month, so pretty soon. So what I'm doing right now is I am transitioning from student visa to this new-ish type of visa, which is called the postgrad visa or the postgraduate visa. So I'm not saying this is the only option you have after you finish studying. I'm just gonna talk about this type of visa because it's the most common one that usually international students apply for, and is the one that I am applying for, so I know a bit more about this postgrad visa. So with the postgraduate visa, you are allowed to stay in the UK for 2 more years after you finish studying. So in my case, that would mean from February 2024, which is when my student visa expired, until February 2026. So in these 2 years, I have several options. I can look for a job and I can work. I don't have to be in a job to be under the postgraduate visa. So this means that any employer can hire me, again, without the need of having a sponsorship. In my experience, I was already working since October last year under my student visa, which allowed me, again, to work full-time after my studies were done. But now I have to transition to this visa in order to stay in the UK and to continue with my current role, which I am currently 4 months in. So this postgrad visa has its pros, has its cons. I would say one of the cons would be the cost of this visa, which is a bit pricey. It's around £2,000. That is for 2 years. So it includes the visa fee, which is around £800, plus the health surcharge, which is around £1,200. This is all approximate fees, which might vary throughout the next academic year perhaps, but this is the average amount that the postgrad visa is costing at the moment, 2024 January. So obviously a huge pro is that now you are allowed to stay 2 years, which is actually a lot of time in the UK without a sponsorship. So you can think of this visa as an investment in order for you as an international student to be able to stay in the UK for 2 more years without the need of a sponsorship. Now, the reason that I transitioned from student visa and a postgrad visa was because I wasn't able to get a sponsored role, which would be actually the ideal scenario for me. So when I applied to this role, I knew that my employer, which is a non-for-profit organization, wasn't able to sponsor visas. I decided still to apply, and I decided to tell my employer that I was willing to get my postgrad visa and just remain under that visa until something changes. In my case, in my sector, the types of roles that I was looking for, usually they didn't sponsor roles, and the most common sectors that do sponsor roles are marketing, finance, maybe HR, but the ones that I was looking, which were non-for-profits, colleges, some universities, usually they didn't sponsor roles. So I knew of this postgrad visa route, and I decided to just go with that route, and if something changes, that is, if I do get a sponsorship from another employer along the line, then so be it. But for now, I am okay with my postgrad visa, at least for the time being. So if you want more information about how to actually get a sponsorship, because it's not actually something impossible to do, I know people that are under a sponsorship right now, it's doable. I do suggest you to follow this page, which is called Mind the Grad. She talks about all about sponsorship roles for international students in the UK specifically. I myself follow this girl, and I think it's really helpful if you're more interested in getting to know about which sectors sponsor more, how to get a sponsorship role, etc. Obviously, all of this if you actually want to stay in the UK. So this leads us to part 3, which is what happens after your postgrad visa has expired. What happens after the 2 years? The bad news is that the postgrad visa won't count towards the 5 years that you need to spend in the UK to apply for the indefinite leave to remain that would lead you towards the UK residency. So these 5 years that you need to spend in the UK are under certain types of visas, which the most common ones are the skilled worker visa, which is the sponsored role, or the innovator visa, which is if you want to start a business in the UK. So you need to spend 5 years under any of these 2 types of visa, skilled worker visa or innovator visa, or any other visa that allows you to gain indefinite leave to remain. I'm saying there are other visas because I'm not going to mention them in this video, but I do suggest you research and get to know about what other types of visas are there that actually can lead you towards indefinite leave to remain. And I'm going to just drop a link for you to read more about these 2 types of visas in the description below. But I just want you to get the message that the postgrad visa gets you time to figure out if you want to get a sponsorship, gets you time if you want to perhaps create a business under the innovator visa, or obviously just work and just use the postgrad visa to work without a sponsorship, and perhaps you don't want to stay in the UK, perhaps you just want to stay for 2 years or less using your postgrad visa, and that is also very, very valid. So one point that I want to talk about is that if you manage to get the postgrad visa and you've managed to get a sponsor role, it doesn't mean that you need to stay 5 years with that sponsor role or in that specific role. If you manage to get another sponsor role, then that is also okay. As long as you are under a sponsorship in general, perhaps you got another role, another employer decided to sponsor you, you can then transition to this other role. And overall, it needs to be 5 years that you are under a sponsorship before again applying for indefinite leave to remain in the UK. With the innovator visa, it works differently because the innovator visa, it's a visa that allows you to create a business in the UK and that you can actually work part-time whilst creating your business. You can do so for 5 consecutive years and then again also apply for indefinite leave to remain. So I'm going to talk now about my case, my experience, what I'm thinking to do with this postgrad visa. I've just transitioned from the student visa, and in February I will be with the postgrad visa, and this will allow me to stay in the UK until February 2026. I can stay in my current role, I can change employers, I can not work at all and just look for a job, but obviously then how would you live, right? Or I can work part-time hours, full-time hours. The contract type doesn't really matter in a postgraduate visa, which is actually great. But I am still figuring out if I actually want a sponsorship after all. So firstly, when I arrived to the UK, I was thinking of getting a sponsorship after my master's. I tried to do applications, then I found out that my sector, which I want to pursue, doesn't really sponsor so much. And then my question was, but do I want to actually spend 5 years under a sponsorship or etc. in order to have the indefinite leave to remain in the UK, that is the UK residence afterwards? So the answer is, I don't know. I don't know if I want to stay 5 consecutive years under any of these types of visas, that is, if I get it in the UK and then be a UK resident. I am not sure. So what I'm going to do is stick with my postgraduate visa, stick with my current role, which I actually enjoy what I'm doing. I currently am working as an employment advisor in a non-for-profit. I think I've mentioned it sometimes. I haven't talked thoroughly about my job. Hopefully in future videos I will. So what I'm thinking is just staying in my current role, which is not a sponsored role. But what I'm saying is I don't know which route or if I want to actually stay in the long term in the UK. So for now, I guess I'm just gonna embrace where I am right now and embrace that I actually enjoy what I'm doing, coaching young people get into employment or education. This is really something that I'm passionate about. So perhaps I will move to another country after 1 year and continue with my studies into becoming a qualified psychologist. Who knows, really? So I'm just going to trust the process and live one day at a time, which is actually really hard for me to do. So if you've come to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I hope this gave you a valuable insight towards what is it like for international students in the visa sense. What options are there? Of course, I've mentioned the most common ones. There are so many other types of visas. Again, like I said, if you found this video somehow helpful, if you're thinking of moving to the UK as an international student or are just exploring your options of study abroad, I'm happy to answer any of these questions based on my own experience. So do leave me a DM on my Instagram page if you have more questions and what other topics might interest you, and I'd be happy to create more videos based on that. I hope you have a great start of your weekend and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.